If you want to have a little idea of what might happen here in America and Canada in 15 years from today, look at Europe today. Because America and Canada are behind Europe in a time lap of maybe 15 years in this regard. And the Atlantic Ocean is not wide enough to keep America and Canada safe from what happens today in Europe. Universities, gazillions of dollars are being poured by Qatar. And Qatar is the enemy of mankind. Qatar is the enemy of Westernism. Qatar is the enemy of America. New York, which experienced the worst jihadi action only 25 or 24 years ago, today was occupied peacefully by the New Yorkers who voted for the reoccupation of New York.
Welcome to the Viktor Frankl podcast. I'm Lori Fine, Esquire, here with my co-host, Rabbi Daniel Schonbuch. We're here today with Professor Mordechai Kedar. He is a professor at Bar-Ilan University, and he was a long-time IDF lieutenant colonel in the 8200 unit, which is the equivalent of Israel's NSA, doing intelligence work. He is fluent in Arabic and an expert on the Arab world. Professor Kedar, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure and my honor to be here.
We're very excited to have you with us today. There's so much to discuss, lots happening in the world of what's going on between the United States and Israel, what's happening here domestically, and also what's happening in Israel. So let's dive right in. This week, we saw the Saudis come to Washington, D.C. and strike up a new agreement with the United States. Can you talk a little bit about that and what your thoughts are on that new development?
Well, the Middle East is sharply divided between countries which are wholeheartedly committed to wipe Israel off the map. I'm talking about Iran. I'm talking organizations like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the likes. And on the other side, we see countries which have no problem with Israel. Actually, they normalize their relations with Israel, like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco. Saudi Arabia is one of them, because Saudi Arabia is actually struggling to survive, really, literally, vis-a-vis Iran. The Saudis remember very, very well what happened at 4 o'clock in the morning on the 14th of September 2019. It was like 5 years ago when the Iranians attacked 2 major sites of oil export belonged to Aramco, one in place named Khurais, and the other one is Abqaiq, and they destroyed them totally. And they actually paralyzed like half of the ability of Saudi Arabia to export oil for like half a year. This was a big, big blow to the Saudis from the Iranians. Apparently, the reason was that Iran understood that Saudi Arabia is marching forward to normalization with Israel, something which happened half a year later in the signing of the Abraham Accords, while Saudi Arabia was out of the scenery because of this hit which the Iranians hit the Saudis. The Saudis are the victims of the Iranians before Israel. And this is why they want to have a good relations with the West, with America, and I'm not afraid of the Saudis at all. The Saudis, if they were not afraid of the Iranians, they would normalize the relations with Israel long ago. So this is why this F-35 business with the Saudis, I'm not afraid of it.
Would you agree that if the Saudis are stronger, actually, Israel is weaker because they need us less now with their own weaponry as advanced as the Israelis?
No, I wouldn't advocate any idea to depend on Israel because Israel is not going to fight anybody's war. If Iran attacks Saudi Arabia, I'm at all not sure that Israel will send its troops to save Saudi Arabia or any other country. We are not there in order to defend Arab countries from their Muslim enemies like the Iranians. Therefore, I do support the idea to enable Saudi Arabia to sustain in front of the Iranians. This is what we all need in order to make the equation in the Middle East more rational. Don't forget that Saudi Arabia has another enemy, which is Qatar. Qatar is in bed with the Iranians. Qatar incites everybody against Saudi Arabia and against us and against the West. Qatar is the enemy of Saudi Arabia, just like the Iranians. And unfortunately, the Saudis were, I would say, forced, but definitely felt that they are obliged to go to Qatar after Israel attacked Hamas leaders in Qatar. So this is the real picture behind the scenes in the Middle East. And therefore, Israel should not be afraid of Saudi Arabia, which is stronger. Saudi Arabia doesn't look for wars. Saudi Arabia doesn't. Look, even the Palestinian issue, if the Saudis were not forced by the Iranians to advocate a Palestinian state, they wouldn't do it. But since the Saudis so far are afraid of the Iranians, they advocate a Palestinian state.
Do you foresee normalization with Saudis and Israel in the near future?
Look, relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia already contain some elements of normalizations. As you know, since the Abraham Accords were signed a few years ago, Saudi Arabia allows El Al to fly above Saudi soil on their way to the Emirates and to Bahrain. So what is this if not, at least partially, normalization?
Okay. Let's move on to what you brought up, the future of the Palestinian, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. Tell us about the plan, what your thoughts are on the proposed plan of the Trump administration, as well as your own plan for an Emirates-style arrangement.
First of all, we have to divide between Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, and Gaza. Until the war, I included them together because of the possibility to do the same thing as I will describe. But since the war started, and the fact that many of the clans in Gaza are shattered to pieces, I'm at all not sure that this is applicable on Gaza. But apart from this, the Judea and Samaria, the Arab population is very clannish. And in the Arab world, and we are talking about Arabs after all, in the Arab world, the Arab countries are sharply divided between two kinds of states. One kind is the failing states, and one kind is a successful state. The failing states are Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Sudan, Libya, while the successful ones are Kuwait, Qatar is a successful state, the 7 Arab Emirates, which are united in the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Sultanate of Oman, and Saudi Arabia. The question is, why are Lebanon, Syria, and so forth are failing, while Kuwait and the Emirates are successful? One would say because of the oil in the Gulf. It's wrong, because Iraq has a lot of oil, and Iraq is a failing state. Hell on earth. Libya as well has a lot of oil. Yet it is a totally failing state. While Dubai, for example, has no oil and no gas. Maybe 1 or 2% of their economy is based on gas and oil. And Dubai, without oil, is heaven on earth. So definitely it's not the oil, because Iraq and Libya, with a lot of oil, are hell on earth. So what is the reason for the failure? The fact that each and every one of these countries, the failing countries, are a conglomerate of ethnic groups like Arabs, Kurds, Turkmens, Armenians, and Berbers in North Africa, clannish groups, means tribes, religious groups like Muslims, Christians, Alawites, Druze, Yazidis, and many more religions. Only Iraq is 10 religions in Iraq. And sectarian groups, Sunnah, Shia, all kinds of denominations. So when the society of a state is comprised of many ethnic, tribal, religious, and or sectarian groups, the state has to be the dictatorship in order to impose itself on the people who want to remain as they are, loyal to their backgrounds, while the state, using modern slogans like socialism, liberalism, modernism, all these isms, which came from the West, is actually a failing state, because the people look at the state as something which was imposed on them by the West, either by France or by Britain or by Italy when it comes to the Libyan case. So the state has to be dictatorship to fight its own people, as we see in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, and the state is a failure. While the successful states, Kuwait and the Gulf states, each and everyone belongs to one single clan. Kuwait belongs to Al-Sabah. This is the clan of Sabah. Qatar belongs to Al-Thani. Dubai belongs to Al-Maktoum. Abu Dhabi belongs to Al-Nahyan. And Saudi Arabia belongs to Al-Saud. Means, if you establish a state on a homogeneous, consolidated clan, it's a successful state. Nobody fights anybody. And the leadership is actually the traditional leadership, which was the leaders already 200 years ago when they were riding camels in the desert. Okay, today they ride golden Lamborghinis. What's the difference? There's no difference. The camel is 4-on-4, and the Lamborghini also. The camel has leather seats. The same thing as the Lamborghini. Means they adopted in the Gulf, they adopted the modern tools, devices, cars, computers, cell phones, everything, but they did not adopt the Western values. They continue to run their states based on the clan system, which is the only system which works in the Middle East. This is the Middle East. A small introduction. Now, if we want to solve the Palestinian issue, which paradigm will you take? The successful one or the failing one? Of course, you will not take the failing one, you'll take the successful one. Means to take the clan system and to emulate it to Judea and Samaria. Therefore, I advocate for many years already, maybe more than 20 years I'm talking about this, to establish an emirate in each and every city, Arab city in Judea and Samaria, like in Hebron, for example, for the clans of Hebron, which are the Jabri, Guardsman, Natchet, Tamimi, Abu Snena, and they live with each other fairly well through the centuries. And they should have an emirate in Hebron, another emirate in Shechem, means Nablus, which will be based on the Masri, Tukan, and Shaka clans who live together very nicely. Another one in Jericho for the Arikats. Another emirate in Tulkarem for the Karmis. Another emirate in Ramallah for the Barghoutis and their friends. And Israel should forever remain in the rural areas and maybe even annex them and offer Israeli citizenship to the villagers. And this is the only solution which corresponds with sociology and the culture of the Middle East. This is why this is the only viable solution for the Israeli-Palestinian problem. The PA could turn into some kind of a federation, umbrella of these Emirates, maybe like the United Arab Emirates, which, as you know, is a federation of sovereign states, unlike the Europe, it's more or less like the European Union, because it's not like the United States of America. New York is not sovereign. New Jersey is not sovereign. Florida is not sovereign, because sovereignty here belongs to the Union. In Europe, each and every country, like Germany, Netherlands, France, Holland, are sovereign. They didn't give up on sovereignty. The same thing is in the United Arab Emirates. Abu Dhabi is sovereign, Dubai is sovereign, Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah, Ajman, all these Emirates, 7 Emirates, are sovereign. The same thing might be also with the Palestinian Emirates, who might be either autonomous or sovereign, I don't know yet, but definitely separate from each other, run by the local clans, which are the society, not impose somebody from Tzfat, like Abu Mazen on them, or Yasser Arafat, who was actually born in Egypt, not even in Judea and Samaria. So this is why they failed. The only successful paradigm is to establish local Emirates in these cities, and this is why Hamas are against the clans, because Hamas in Gaza, for example, they know that the clan system is the only system which can challenge Hamas.
Were those people that were shot in Gaza over the last few months that were rebelling against Hamas, was that the infancy of some of these clans you're referring to, or there's no resistance from the clan? Yes.
Definitely. It's Abu Shabab and Durmush and other clans which tried to resist Hamas because they blame Hamas, and for a good reason, for the destruction in Gaza, while Israel tried to support those clans. Some of them are in connection with Israel. There is no doubt. And if Israel supports the clans in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza, this system can replace the jihadism of Hamas and the lawlessness of the PA.
What are the aspects of sovereignty that you would envision allowing these clans to adopt? What would you keep for Israel, and what would be the powers you would cede to the clans?
Look, I'm not sure that they really want sovereignty, and I'm not going to impose it on them if they don't want. However, they should not be part of the state of Israel because demography. If we include all those Arabs who are in Hebron, in Shechem, in Nablus, in Tulkarem, Kalkilia, Ramallah, Jericho, and Jenin, the Israeli majority is in danger. So this is why what I advocate is to create local frameworks for them. They will run those cities by themselves. They will not be included in Israel, at least not in the voting people. And they will live in peace with Israel, side by side with Israel. And Israel will make sure that they're not importing anything dangerous, because they are surrounded by Israel, all these cities. And like the Vatican in Rome, the same paradigm, or Luxembourg, or Andorra. There are all kinds of examples all over the world, of Monaco, of countries which are within other countries in an independence to a degree, some kind of degree of independence. And definitely, if it is by agreement between Israel and these cities, it can be a very good solution for them and for us.
Well, I
But what will
admire this
have
kind of optimism, and I would love to see something that was so peaceful work out. I don't know if the examples you gave tend to be countries that are very much at peace with the surrounding country, and so far we have not been blessed with that type of relationship.
Yeah.
Look, I look at the Gulf Emirates, at the United Arab Emirates as the model for the Palestinian Emirates. This is why I chose the term Emirates in order to equate what should happen in Judea and Samaria, maybe Gaza as well, with the successful paradigm of the Gulf.
What will have to happen to Mahmoud Abbas and the PA at this point to transition towards this vision that you have of these families running Judea and Samaria? Do they have to be taken out, delegitimized? What would be the practical next step to carrying out your plan?
It's either they dissolve because nobody needs them, or it becomes some kind of an umbrella organization, federation of all these clans. If the clan Emirates decide to have a federation. Look, I'm talking about 7: Hebron, Jericho, Ramallah, Nablus, Jenin, Tulkarm, and Kalkilia. Let's say 6 of them or 5 of them, I don't know, will want to be a federation. Let them be a federation. And the PA will turn to some kind of an umbrella, which will unite them to a degree. If they all want to have a federation, let them. I'm not interfering in their domestic issues as long as Israel's security is being provided.
How does this relate to the Trump plan for Gaza, the 20-point peace plan?
First of all, I am rather surprised to find that Trump calls it a peace plan. Why? Because any peace between any 2 entities, like a man and a woman, his wife, or 2 brothers, or 2 companies, or 2 cities, or 2 between any peace between 2 parties, requires mutual recognition of both sides, that both sides are legitimate to exist. And this is the basis of any agreement between two sides. Unfortunately, this basis is missing between Israel and Hamas. Israel doesn't think that Hamas should exist, and Hamas doesn't think that Israel should exist. So what can you expect from 2 sides who do not recognize mutually each other's right to exist? There could be any agreement, any peace. You can achieve ceasefire because both sides don't shoot each other. But to recognize each other's right to exist, I don't see. Neither Israel recognizes Hamas's right to exist, nor Hamas's recognition of Israel's rights to exist. So this is why I'm rather surprised to find that somebody calls it peace agreement. It could be ceasefire, no more.
And what do you think is the possibility that the ISF, the strategic forces of Arab countries and others, will be successful in demilitarizing, denazifying the Gaza Strip? I mean, we're talking about people like the Turkish on board that are not exactly our friends either. It seems to be quite dangerous to allow people of foreign countries to come into our territory and to take control of a territory at this point.
Well, I see two major problems. One problem is the mere fact that I'm not sure that any soldier in the world would be brave enough to go to the Hamas fighters and force them to give up on the weapons, because more chance that he gets a bullet in his head, whoever he is, and because those people are holding to the weapons for a reason, because they want to hold the weapons, they want to control the place, and they do not want to give up. Just look at two-year war with Israel, which they actually sacrificed the whole Gaza Strip in order to keep holding to their weapons. So I'm not sure that a Qatari soldier or Turkish soldier or any other soldier will sacrifice himself in order to go and to extract the weapons from the hands of Hamas. This is one thing. Second thing, if you look at the countries which are in this force, you can see clearly two coalitions. One coalition is Hamas with Qatar, with Turkey, which do want Hamas to continue to control Gaza with the weapons, with everything which they have, in order to repeat October 7th at some point in the future. While the other countries in this force, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, and more, who do not want to see Hamas, who hate Hamas, hate the Muslim Brotherhood, and want definitely to destroy Hamas and to get rid of Hamas. So I really don't see how these two coalitions, which are actually totally opposite from each other, how they function in Gaza together under the American flag. So, apparently Trump wants more countries because the more the merrier, but it doesn't work. In my view, it cannot work because this is the Middle East. It's here. It's not America and not the American
Canada.
concepts.
Let's now to more domestic issues. As a long-term academic yourself, I'm curious what you think of the struggles that we've been having over the last 2 years, and really much longer than that, within American academic circles, where we see that the academy has been so unable to, or really unwilling to, recognize as propaganda, as advocacy, so many aspects of what is being taught about Israel committing genocide, about Israel being an illegitimate state and a colonizer, et cetera, and they're teaching this as truth. What do you think might be done, and where do you think that comes from, and what do you think that those who oppose those ideas could possibly do to help that?
Well, the struggle in the academia started more or less like 40 years ago in the big debate between Edward Said and his school of thought from Columbia University in New York on one side, and the other side, which was led by Professor Bernard Lewis in Princeton. These two professors of Middle East were totally different in their approach. Bernard Lewis said that the history of the Arab world and the Islamic world should be studied as it was, with the problems, with the violence, with the struggles between the Sunni and the Shia, between Arabs and Persians, between Kurds and Turks. Yeah, and struggles sometimes were bloody struggles. And yes, we have to be realistic and talk about the realism, and also about Islam and all kinds of commandments in Islam, which are rather problematic when it comes to modern world. And he was very realistic about Islam in the Arab world. On the other side, Edward Said blamed the West for everything which goes wrong in the Middle East. Blamed the colonialism, blamed the imperialism, blamed the British, blamed the Americans, blamed everybody else, because the Middle East is like a Jannah Fayha, as they say in Arabic, a flourishing heaven on earth. And only the Westerners, including the Jews who the settlers in Palestine, actually they ruined the Arab world, and they pushed it into violence. And all the violence which we see in the Arab world is the result of the interference and the bad intentions of the colonialism and the imperialism, which studied Islam only to justify its bad intentions vis-a-vis the Arab world and to take advantage of the treasures of the Arab world, especially the oil. So this is Edward Said. Edward Said actually wrote a book, a very famous book, Orientalism. Orientalism, where he bashed all the Western approach to the Middle East and the researchers who actually meant only to prove that the West is superior and the East is inferior. This is why the colonialism and imperialism are justified. Okay, these are the two, I would say, major schools of thought when it comes to the Middle East. Unfortunately, too many people in the American, and not only in the European, also in Israel, academic institutions fell in love with the Edward Said approach and blamed us, as the West, as the Americans, as the Europeans, and as the Israelis, for everything which goes wrong in the Arab world. The Arab world is heaven on earth, but because of the interference of others, and of course the settlers in Palestine, the Jewish settlers, everything goes wrong. So this is unfortunately what happened. And even organizations like MESA, Middle East Studies Association here in America, was taken over by this school of thought to a degree that some hundreds of researchers left MESA and established a new research organization named ASMIA, Association for the Study of the Middle East and Africa, led by the late Bernard Lewis and Fuad Ajami, a Lebanese who also was realistic. So even the American, and not only the American, research community is divided, sharply divided, between those who blame the West for every shortcoming of the Islamic and the Arab world, while the realistic ones who show the reality in the Arab and the Islamic world. So when the woke started to wake up, and the liberals and the progressives, they actually fell in love with Edward Said. And this is actually what you see today, that everybody's blaming Israel and blaming America, blaming Europe for centuries of colonialism. And this is why today we have to return to love Islam, to love the Arabs, and to enable them to migrate to our countries, even at the price of changing the human landscape of Europe and maybe America and Canada as well. And let me tell you, what happens today here in the United States in this regard, you saw in Europe like 15 years ago. If you want to have a little idea of what might happen here in America and Canada in 15 years from today, look at Europe today. Because America and Canada are behind Europe in a time lap of maybe 15 years in this regard. And the Atlantic Ocean is not wide enough to keep America and Canada safe from what happens today in Europe. If Americans do not wake up to see the invasion of Muslim Brotherhood by Qatari money,
and care.
By Qatari money. Look at what happens in the universities. Only recently, ISGAP, my colleague, my friend, Professor Charles Asher Small, exposed the Qatari sponsorship in American universities. Gazillions of dollars are being poured by Qatar. And Qatar is the enemy of mankind. Qatar is the enemy of the Westernism. Qatar is the enemy of America, of Israel. Look, I think 13 years ago, in 2012, I published an article, and it is online, you can find it, under my name, Mordechai Kedar, Know Thine Enemy. Know Thine Enemy, about Qatar. Already 13 years ago, I pointed that Qatar is the enemy of Israel enemy of the West, enemy of Westernism, enemy of everything which we believe in. Because this is what they are. They support the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the spearhead of the Islamic activity against the West. And unfortunately, in the United States, you have organizations like CARE, an organization which devoted to promote Islamic causes, and they operate organizations like MSA, Muslim Student Association, which spreads anti-Jewish hatred in American academic institutions, and many more organizations. And unfortunately, this organization enjoys the status of 501c3, maybe C4 as well, because it's a good organization, unfortunately. And Qatar, unfortunately, today is viewed by the West as the friend, including here, because people don't read what is being published in Arabic, especially by those who are sponsored by Qatar, especially the Muslim Brotherhood, how they spread hatred against the West, against America, against Israel included, against the Westernism. And unfortunately, people think that Qatar is the friend. No, Qatar is the enemy. And I think that Qatari money is a money which nobody with the right mind should touch.
I think I would just want to point out for our listeners that you were talking about really two separate threads. You have the academic debate, which is more of on an intellectual level, whether Said's version of analysis versus Bernard Lewis's analysis of the situation is more accurate. But then you also have layered on top of that the Qatari-led, but also sponsored by others, deliberate, let's call it perversion of academic inquiry and transformation of what we would consider academic freedom into something that is more like a propaganda campaign. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. Look, the rift in the research community between Said and Lewis actually is a rift between realism and idealism. Because don't forget that any academic institution which falls into the trap of Said, every single year it breeds people to the media. You know, the graduates are being fed with the propaganda of Edward Said and its likes and its followers. They go to the media, they go to politics, they go to public sphere, they become influencers in the social media. They are everywhere. And it's like a scheme of people who took over the public sphere. And when they become, let's say, staffers of Congress members and senators, they actually control what these people think. And this is the problem. It's not only the professor in the university. It's his graduates who are everywhere. And I'm talking about something which is 40 years already. 40 years of graduates who are everywhere. And they are educated by this kind of ideology that America is bad. Look, the woke culture is also part of it. And the ultra progressives. And this is what you see here in the States. The rift is also about many issues connected to the mere being of the United States as a state.
What would you think it would be in the next 10, 15 years, besides America flipping towards Qatar and Said and those friends over there? What would you say the military threats to Israel right now? Some people said that Egypt is militarizing again in the Sinai. Turkey under the new leadership, the leadership right now is dangerous to Israel? What are the big threats now? What should we be looking out for in the next decade or two?
Look, I don't ignore the Egyptian army in Sinai. I don't ignore the Turkish and the Turkish intentions to maybe to restore the Ottoman Empire. And here I must tell you a story which happened to me a few years ago. One day, Erdogan gave a speech, and he was speaking, like kind of nostalgia about the Ottoman Empire. And for me, it was like a little alarm. Does he want to restore the Ottoman Empire? Means to occupy Syria, to occupy Lebanon, to occupy the western part of Jordan, to occupy Israel, and no less, Mecca and Medina, the Hijaz, where the Ottoman Empire once was. So when I heard this speech, I called a friend of mine, a colleague, in one of the Turkish universities, and I asked him, not a Jew. So I asked him, is he serious? Is Erdogan serious about the restoration of the Ottoman Empire? So the other guy laughed and said, look, he says to me, look, you Jews, you dreamt for 2,000 years about returning to your land. And you did it. You returned and you established a state after 2,000 years of exile. Okay? Yes. Aren't we allowed to dream about lands which were under our control until 100 years ago? First World War, when
makes a
Turkey
good case.
So if we Jews have the right to dream about our forefathers' land and return to it, don't they, means the Turks, have the same right to return to lands which they were ousted from only 100 years ago? Okay, so this is the logic of Erdogan. Okay, whether we understand it or not, whether we sympathize with it or not, or whether we agree with this or not, this is how the man thinks apparently. So, add to this the fact that many in the Islamic world reject our claim to Eretz Israel. Why? They claim that there is absolutely no connection between the Israelites who once lived in Eretz Israel and the Jews whom you see today. There's no relation, because those Israelites disappeared, just like the Babylonians and the Assyrians in Syria, the Babylonians in Iraq, the Phoenicians in Lebanon, the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians in Egypt, and the new nations in these countries have absolutely no connection with the ancient nations which lived on their soil thousands of years ago. So why should the Jews of today be given the right to associate themselves or to present themselves as the descendants of the Israelites who lived in Eretz Israel until some thousands of years ago? So this is why the Jews today, they claim that we all are descendants of the Khuzaris who converted to Judaism in the 15th century. And this is why we Jews have no connection to the Israelites of yore. Okay? So since they don't accept our claim to our forefathers' land, for them it's much more logical to restore the Ottoman Empire, which nobody denies that it controlled Eretz Israel for 400 years between 1517 and 1917. So here you are. And as we say in Yiddish, jetzt kriegt sich mit sei. And now go fight with them.
Well, let me ask you this other question. So we see what Neo-Ottomanism looks like from Erdogan's perspective. But what do you believe is the future of Israel? What should we as Jews focus on for Israel in terms of our culture, our religion, our identity in the future?
Well, first of all, I'm a compulsive optimist about Israel. Not because Israel is the heaven on earth, but because our surroundings is hell on earth. Look at Syria, look at Lebanon, Even Turkey, between the Turks and the Kurds. Look at potentially Jordan. Potentially Jordan is a very big problem between the royal family and on one side, the Bedouins on the other side, and the Palestinians, which are the majority on the other side. I have absolutely no idea what will be the future of Jordan. And we should, those who want to keep Jordan together as a functioning state should add Jordan to their prayers. Egypt is constantly on the verge of bankruptcy. So when I see the Middle East around Israel, Israel is like a villa in the jungle. And the jungle is a jungle not because of the trees and not because of the animals. It's because the animals are actually devouring each other. And this is what is around Israel. Look at Lebanon, look at Syria, look what happens in Syria. And I don't advocate what happens there, but this is the reality. I'm realistic. I'm talking about what happens around us. Of course, I don't ignore the jihadism, which you see within Hamas and other Palestinians also. And we do have problems within Israel as well. We have the Islamic movement inside Israel, and they are Israeli citizens. And the Muslim Brotherhood in Israel is a very, very problematic organization, and Israel should know how to deal with this. Definitely, I'm not ignoring the dangers, but when I see the surroundings of Israel, I'm much more confident that Israel will stay forever, as long as we Jews understand the problem and don't fall into the trap of the progress and Edward Said.
Lori, do you want to ask a final question?
Yeah, I wonder if you think that Jews in America should be supporting. We're looking for what to support, and do you think that there is hope for Israel to remain to advance its interests vis-a-vis all of these many threats coming in? And if American Jews want to support Israel, do you think that we should be advocating for these compromises, or do you think that it is more helpful to Israel if Jews are giving a sort of blanket support as in the past?
Look, I'm a very small expert about American Jewry, but from what I see, when I come to this country, to speak, and I hear things and I read things, the American Jewry is a whole spectrum between ultra-Orthodox and Reform, and liberals. It's a big variety. You see the whole realm, a whole spectrum of ideas within the Jewish communities, to a degree that good percentage of the Jewish community in New York voted for Mamdani only recently. So, Bernie Sanders, as a Jewish guy, advocates more or less the destruction of the state of Israel. Maybe not explicitly, but this is the meaning of what he says. So, on the other side, you can see others who are totally opposite. So I'm not coming to educate the American Jewry, but what I think that every Jew in America should bear in mind the fact that if things here in America become too problematic for Jews, and just look at France today. France became very problematic for Jews to live in. And as I told you, here in America, in 15 years, if America is not careful enough, the situation will be more or less like in Europe today. If America becomes dangerous for Jews, the only option for Jews to run away to is Israel. Whether you're liberal or conservative or whatever you are, if America becomes a dangerous place for Jews to live in, they have only one safety net. And the safety net is Israel. So, whether you like Israel or not, you might find yourself one day fleeing to Israel. And again, I'm not trying to say that America might turn into something like France. But there is a possibility that by migration and by all kinds of domestic developments, Islam in America will become something more influential. And just to remind you, the Muslim Brotherhood activists in the Obama time in presidency were coming in and out in the White House the way they wanted. They had direct access to Obama. I'm talking about organizations like CARE. And they are sponsored by Qatar, the enemy of the United States, the enemy of Israel, the enemy of Westernism. If they have, again, access to the White House, as they had already, America might become something totally different, or I would say something similar to what happened in Europe. Just look at Britain. Britain, the kingdom where the sun never set on this empire which spread Westernism all over the world, from India to here. A country which is the beacon of Westernism, what it became today. Captive in the hands of the jihadists. 20 years ago, Melanie Phillips wrote the book Londonistan, how, and the subtitle, How Britain Becomes a Terror State from Within. She's still alive. She's a prophet. And she wrote about this. Bat Yaor, another Jewish lady, her real name is Giselle Littman, a lady who was born in Egypt. That's why she calls herself Bat Yaor, the daughter of the Nile. She lives in Europe, and she wrote already 40 years ago the book Eurabia, how the EU means the European Union becomes Arabia, succumbs to this influx of Arabs and changes the landscape. So if it happened in Europe, if it happened in Britain, if it happened in France, France was very national, nationalistic in its nature and culture. Today, there's a North Algeria, France. I went to Paris a few years ago, and I went to neighborhoods like Saint-Saint-Denis and Barbès. You know where you came to? Either you came to the Casbah of Nablus or to Paris. I went to Molenbeek in Brussels. I felt like in Algeria. Okay, this is Europe of today. And if America doesn't watch it, this is the American future. Look at Europe today. And I'm not, trying to be an alarmist. I'm realistic, because I know about things here in America. I actually published 10 years ago, even more. I think it was 2012, an article in Middle East Quarterly about Sharia and violence in American mosques. I co-authored it with David Yerushalmi. So if you Google Kedar and Yerushalmi, you'll find this article in no time, because this is the only document in the whole internet which bears both our names. Kedar, K-E-D-A-R, and Yerushalmi, Y-E-R-U-S-H-A-L-M-I. And you'll find this article, this research. And we analyzed, it was, I think, in 2012 already, 13 years ago, how American mosques are spreading terrorism here on this continent, already then. So, and it continues. It was never stopped. We found all kinds of books and booklets about jihad in American mosques. And in New York, we found a booklet under the title in English, what should you do if you are framed or caught by the racist, fascist, criminal FBI or by the racist, fascist, criminal police? How to sustain in interrogations. This is what they spread in their mosques. Can you imagine a synagogue in the United States disseminating such booklets?
Right.
Who would
Well, I
right
think
mind?
that to react to some of the things that you mentioned, first of all, I think that many American Jews are already feeling unsafe. I know that I live in New Jersey. I have many friends who live in New York City, and I would say that not a day goes by where somebody does not mention wondering whether they should allow their to allow their son to still wear a kippah in public, or whether they feel like their kids are safe to go in a Jewish event and show up there. And so I think that we already are feeling that vice tightening in America. And I think that you bring such an important point, which is recognizing the intent of so many groups that are already here. I think that one of the hardest things for American Jews is trying to acknowledge that there may be a desire to harm. With so many Jews who voted for Mamdani, or at least were not outspokenly opposed to him, said, well, he's not really, he doesn't really mean it. And maybe I hope they're right. But I think that what you're saying about your study with Professor Yerushalmi and other things is that there are those who are really devoted to undermining Jewish life and Western life in the United States, and that we need to have our guard up and be careful about that. So I appreciate you.
Look, Laura,
thank you so much for bringing those ideas
before
forward.
Something has to be mentioned here. The election of Mamdani is not a matter of New York. New York is not a city only. New York is a symbol. It's not Dearborn, Michigan. It's New York, the Big Apple. When Mamdani won, you have no idea how people all over the Islamic world felt that they are on the way to conquer America. If they succeeded to occupy the White House 10 years ago, more, and now New York, they occupy the American politics and they occupy the American economy, because New York is hub of economy. And the symbol of New York is way much beyond the city itself. And for them, it is very symbolic. Not only this, they did it, 24 years after September 11. September 11 was a military victory, while today is a civil victory. And they combine the two. New York, which experienced the worst jihadi action only 25 or 24 years ago, today was occupied peacefully by the New Yorkers who voted for the reoccupation of New York. This is how these people think. The New Yorkers are so stupid that they actually voted for the jihad to take New York over. No, I'm not claiming that Mamdani is a jihadist. I didn't check his writings and his ideas. But what I'm saying is that's how people feel vis-a-vis this victory of Mamdani. That the jihad succeeded, whether it's named jihad or not. And we, Jews, Westerners, Americans, we should name a spade a spade. We cannot ignore the atmosphere around us, because they are around us. And they are looking to an opportunity to Islamize America. It could take 20 years, 30, 50, 100, doesn't matter. There is a verse in the Quran which says that Inna Allah ma sabirin. Allah is with those who have patience. And they have a lot of patience. A lot of patience. Look, they were defeated in France only, 600 years ago. Now today they take France without one shot. They don't have to shoot. They just have to be there and to bring children to the world. That's all. The womb is the weapon. That's how they look at it. Jihad al-Hijra, as they call it. The jihad of migration. And jihad of settlement also. And here I highly recommend to download a document which is being put for free on the website of the IPT, of the Investigative Project on Terrorism. The document is named the Explanatory Memorandum in the IPT website. You can download it for free and read. The first 16 pages are in Arabic, and the second 16 pages are in English, official translation, because this is an official exhibit in the trial of the Holy Land Foundation, which was in the 90s. And they found this document was written in 1991, already then, 35 years ago, when they formulated the goals of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. And they stated clearly that their goal is to Islamize the United States of America. It could take time, it could take effort, yes. And they have long breath to wait until it happens. We have to wake up. We have to see the reality, and we have to name the spade a spade. And when Qatar is sponsoring this assault on Westernism, on America, on Israel, Qatar should be named the enemy, as I did already almost 13 years ago in this article, Know Thine Enemy.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You know, they may have patience, but we had 2,000 years of patience. And so hopefully we will continue to succeed in our own goals of maintaining our civilization. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lord.